Our guest today on Caribbeana is Professor Vicky Collis-Buthelezi. And Vicky, imagine Vicky is a Trinidadian and in South Africa. How is that, man? How tell me about that. I mean, what happened?
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on. And I have to say, Uncle Vaughn, thank you for having me on, Uncle Vaughn. Uh, I found myself in South Africa, I guess, in two ways. One was I learned about Henry Sylvester Williams,
Ah,
one of the conveners of the 1900 Pan-African Conference,
right, right.
and discovered that he had come to South Africa, lived in Cape Town for a period
Oh,
of time from about 1903, and
yes.
wanted to know why and how and what was he interested in, and found more about him in the archives and discovered other Caribbean folks had moved here at the end of the 19th century,
Yes.
and the research just kept growing. And of course, there's an aspect of it that's also, I say, that's the research plot, and then there's the romance plot.
Right.
I met and married a South African.
Right, right. Fantastic, man. I am so proud of you, man. I just keep hearing the name and then reading about the things that you've done. You know, this question of blackness and the study of it and so on. You're now the director of the Advanced Studies, Johannesburg Institute of Advanced Studies in South Africa. Tell us what that is all about and, what do you hope to get out of this uh, concept?
So the Johannesburg Institute for Advanced Study was started about 10 years ago. We're celebrating our first decade this year. And before coming to the Johannesburg Institute for Advanced Study, or JIAS as we like to call it, I
Mm,
was running the Center for the Study of Race, Gender, and Class, and got a call saying, we think this job will be coming up and we want you to look at it.
yes,
I must say, what I was doing at the time at what we called RGC, uh, Center for the Study of Race, Gender, and Class, fascinated me. I didn't necessarily want to leave it. But what I saw with JIAS was a real opportunity to build a platform for global South conversation. For a long time, I'd been engaging South Africa and the Caribbean and other parts of the African continent, bringing professors to come and visit and have conversations. We had people like David Scott. And in JIAS, I saw the opportunity to really expand on that and to build the possibility for conversation and connection. What does it mean to think about being independent from South Africa,
yes.
right? Being independent in parts of the Caribbean, the African continent, Asia, in this moment from South Africa, more than 30 years after Nelson Mandela came out of prison, South Africa
Right.
became fully democratic. How then to, from this space, ask some of these questions around equality, race, and class?
Right, right, right. So, how do you see this global blackness connecting intellectuals, artists and activists across the African continent and the diaspora emerging?
So, global blackness really for us and for me is about saying, let's have a conversation around blackness that is informed by and shaped by experiences in the Caribbean and on the African continent. And what I mean by that is if we look at a lot of the scholarship around blackness, Black Studies scholarship, to
Right,
which we are indebted,
right,
comes out of the US, but comes out of the US in ways that we have to think about how do the conditions of being Black in the US shape that? and sometimes can limit what is possible in that conversation.
Yeah.
So, to put it another way, if we look at the US, we're dealing with a numerically minoritized population that
Right.
has to deal with uh, other groups, but largely a kind of white majority.
Yeah.
As we're moving into a world in which the majority of the world is not necessarily white.
Right.
How are we together? And how do we think about some of the historical problems around white supremacy?
Right.
Those are things that we've had to deal with in the Caribbean for some time.
Right. Right. Right.
Those are things that we've had to deal with on the African continent for some time.
Right.
What
Right.
does it mean to have maybe a numerical Black population, a majority Black population, but at the same time to still have to deal with white supremacy globally?
Right.
And that's what we're looking to do, to bring folks together to say, how do we deal with this? How do we think about this? What does this mean to imagine equality and to deal with our histories of oppression around race
Yeah.
from contexts where it doesn't quite look the way it looks like in the US. And maybe even the US might be joining the rest of the world with that, because
Right. Right.
increasingly
Right.
the
Right.
the US doesn't have a majority, is moving towards not having a majority population.
Right, right. I mean, when you're considering what is happening to us today, I don't know if you're aware, but someone got killed within the conservative right element, and it's evoking a lot of dialogue. Um, but the dialogue I'm seeing is coming predominantly from the white population, not much black expressions. And it is evident that something is happening there, you know. And so I mean, when you look and see you coming out of South Africa with what Nelson Mandela had to deal with, how do you
Mhm.
perceive people in the diaspora cope with what they're embracing today in the concept of blackness?
That is such an important question, I think, for this moment. So much of what Nelson Mandela dealt with, and people often say, well, he was this one version of him, that he was the reconciler, he was a peacemaker. But
Yeah,
there was also a part of him that was deeply upset and frustrated, and bitter by
yeah,
what he had lost, 27 years
of his
imprisonment,
life.
what
Yeah,
that meant for his family, what that
yeah,
meant for what they had dreamed together. But what is interesting to me is that, in spite of all of that, or maybe because of all of that, recognizing that at that moment he needed to bring the country together,
yes,
there is that work of what does it mean to imagine a new future? What does it mean to imagine a future where we are together? And at the same time, I
yes,
think there's the question of, how do we, in imagining that, not, yes, there's a place for everyone, but not skirt certain questions around historical inequality, different kinds of dispossession? What does it mean to push for reparations or economic
right,
equality?
right, right.
And I think the moment we're dealing with globally is really a reckoning around, we all have to find a way to be together. But what
Yeah,
do we do with history? Now,
right.
on one hand, there is a kind of conservative right wing response that, well, you don't talk about slavery. We don't talk about the bad
Yes,
things of the US. We focus on the quote unquote good things. It's not patriotic to do that.
yes,
But
yeah,
in fact, I think what history shows us is that we just cover over a festering wound, and we
yeah,
have to attend to that.
right,
If
right,
we
right.
go back at this moment in time, I go back to two moments. One is the 1930s, which
Yes,
I think a lot of scholars have been pushing us to the interwar period, the move towards fascism and authoritarianism in Europe.
Yes.
But there's also the period right after Reconstruction in the US, what a lot of scholars call the lowest point in race relations in the US. And
Yeah.
I think those moments come not unlike than what we're dealing with now. That moment came after Reconstruction,
Right. Right.
where it's after emancipation and the abolition of slavery, the push into a kind of widening of access for African Americans in the US and a backlash. And so we're living through another kind of backlash because people don't know what to do with equality. People
Yeah.
don't are scared.
Yes.
Some of us are hungry for it, and some of us are scared that it means that we'll lose. But
Yeah.
in fact, we cannot comfortably have a piece of the pie if other people are without.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, man. Boy. You have announced a new research stream on
Mm.
digital justice and AI plus life matters. What questions do you want this stream to tackle, especially in the context of Africa's future?
Hmm. So with AI and Life Matters, we really brought that in order to think through questions. The University of Johannesburg, where JIAS is based,
Uh-huh.
has really been a leader in thinking through the fourth industrial revolution, trying to lead the way in terms of Africa and South Africa being a part of that conversation. So
Yeah.
with AI and Life Matters, we really wanted to bring to bear what's the strength, I think, of an institute like JIAS, which is
Right.
that we bring all kinds of disciplines together. We bring engineers with economists, with literary scholars, with philosophers. We bring together artists
Yeah.
and designers, architects, poets to
Right.
come together and think through what is it that is happening to our world? What does AI mean for life
Yeah.
as we know it?
Yes.
And we purposely did not go with the idea of the human, but life. So what does it mean for the environment? What does it mean for plant life? What does it mean for humans and what does it mean for questions around race? So how we're pushing this
Yeah.
is that we come together. We're actually launching an interdisciplinary doctoral degree program
Hmm.
where we merge these two research streams, global blackness, AI, and life matters, to
Right.
think around technology and digital transformation
Yeah.
into the future, in our present and into the future, and how we make sure that everyone comes along. So, if we have digital transformation, how
Yeah.
do we ensure that the entire population of South Africa, the African continent, the African diaspora is critical in the rooms where these conversations are happening?
Yeah. So this is very important to African scholars, especially as they play a shape in this global conversation.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yep. 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 You've written about the case for Black studies in South Africa. What do you think is still missing from Black intellectual traditions, are taught and understood in the country?
So I would say that in some ways when I wrote that piece, it came out 2017, about 2 years after we had what were called the Roads Must Fall and the Fees Must Fall student movements
Yes.
across South African universities. And that movement, in many ways, involved was a student movement, but I was also a member of the Black Academic Caucus at University of Cape Town, where I was teaching at that time.
Yes.
Uh, and in many ways, we were, many of us were looking for a place within the academic landscape that recognized that the race question had not been addressed, that it was not over with
Right,
1994, that there were
right,
still things that needed to be attended to,
right.
that who was in front of the classroom mattered, that the content of the curriculum mattered,
Yeah,
that it was not enough to say now we have more access for Black students at South African universities.
yes,
So in many ways, that piece speaks to the need for the traditions of Black studies that were already existing in South Africa. Because I had a lot of people saying to me between 2015 and 2017 when it came out that Black studies is not really South African. It doesn't resonate here. And
yes,
in fact, when I went to the archive, I could see that South African writers like Eskia Mpatlele had come back to South Africa in 1976 before the June 16 student uprising
right,
with the intention of starting an institute for Black studies. That there were all of these community based Black studies groups. And so the idea that this was some kind of import and that it hadn't existed was allowed to fester
yeah,
because so much of that history was being excluded or not taught in the classroom. And so that piece was about recognizing the rich archive that exists and the conversations that people were having within South Africa, but between South Africa and other parts of the continent and the African diaspora.
right, 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 right. Well, finally, as a scholar of the Caribbean, how do you see the intellectual and political histories of the Caribbean and Africa speaking to each other?
Hmm. That's a beautiful question. So that has been, I had someone say to me the other day, you're very interested in this triangulation of Africa, the Caribbean, and the US. And to my mind, there is such a wealth. You look at someone like Margaret Busby,
Yeah,
the editor of Daughters of Africa and New Daughters of Africa, and one of the founders of Allison and Busby,
yes,
which gave us several anthologies of C.L.R. James's work, several collections of C.L.R. James's work. And in
right.
fact, at the time when she published those collections, James had gone out of print
Yes, yeah,
for some years.
yeah,
The work that she did as someone who is of Trinidadian ancestry and Ghanaian ancestry,
hmm,
of pulling work together from Africa and the Caribbean. Daughters of Africa has a range of women writers,
yes, yes,
including Pearl and Tu Springer, for instance,
yes,
from the
yes, yes,
Caribbean and Africa, and pulling those together.
yeah,
That is the kind of work, and those are the kinds of conversations. And one of the things I was fortunate enough to do is to help push for but to also be present at her honorary doctorate here in South Africa, with University of Johannesburg being the first institution to honor her like that on the continent. And
right,
some of those conversations, when we look at that work, we look at James's writing where he writes about the Industrial and Commercial Workers Union, the first African trade union
yeah,
in South Africa in 1919, founded in
yeah,
1919, that
yeah,
included Caribbean dock workers in Cape Town,
right, right, right,
Black South Africans, people from Malawi, people
right,
from other parts, from West Africa, other parts of Southern Africa, coming together. And here it is, James writes about this as central
yes,
to a new kind of revolutionary energy in the 1920s and 1930s. So
yeah,
those links between Africa and the Caribbean and how we're thinking together. Someone like Peter Abrams, who South African, moves to the UK, goes to Jamaica at the invitation of Norman Manley, and sends a telegram to his wife. I've found our home. When Mandela says, hey, you know what, in the 90s, come back, he says, no,
Yeah.
Jamaica is my home now.
Right,
So
right.
that kind of exchange, and he
Yeah,
then writes two novels where he
yeah.
really is trying to think about what it means to be Black in the Caribbean, what it means to be free in the Caribbean, and
Right.
how the Caribbean offers something that he hadn't quite found somewhere else.
Yeah,
Those kinds of conversations, those kinds of exchanges and connections that have to do with a search and a hunger for freedom, a search and a hunger for emancipation. I
yeah.
think those are the connections between Africa and the Caribbean, and
Caribbean.
I am passionate about exploring those.
Right, fantastic, man. This brings some joy to me because I have just recently concluded a book called Voices of Pan Pioneers of Trinidad and Tobago. It's a book on the history of the steel pan, and that is a concept that came out of Africa through the drum, and I'm glad that in future generations, young people will have a chance to read it and to get a chance to see it and so on. All right, so I'll get you a copy of it.
The drum has found its place in another time and space. Let's celebrate.
Yes, 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 yes. Well, listen, Vicky, it has been a real treat, man. Anything you'd like to leave us with?
Well, I want to say thank you because it has been a treat for me as well. I guess I would say check out the Caribbean Race Reader. My colleague Aaron Kamagisha and I are Tanzanian actually,
Okay,
co-edited that, and I think it's important anthology for students and lovers of the Caribbean to look through.
okay, all right. Well, we have email now and Zoom, so we'll be in constant contact. And I look forward to doing a part two of this interview with you. Okay?
Same. Thank you. Thank you, Uncle Vaughn.
All right. All right. I've been speaking with Vicky Collis-Buthelezi, a professor in JIS, the Journal of Institute of Advanced Studies in South Africa, Johannes, South Africa. This is Von Martin. Caribbeana continues.